Another exciting and educating episode of Agric Economy on ARCN Television, Mabushi, Abuja, Nigeria. I am Khadija Oluwatoyin Amin. On today's episode of Agric Economy, we shall take a look at the economic implication of border reopening in the face of the food, crisis we're having in Nigeria, vis-a-vis the price increase. To discuss this with us today on the program is Mr. Gabriel Dakulu. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me.
It is no longer news that the President Buhari-led federal government had in August 2019 ordered a closure to the country's land borders over the illegal importation of drugs, arms and ammunition, as well as agricultural products into Nigeria from neighboring West African countries. However, in December 2020, President Buhari ordered the reopening of 4 land borders. Months after the reopening, President Muhammadu Buhari expressed concern that the closure of the borders failed to stop arms smuggling into Nigeria, a motion sponsored by 11 members of the House of Representatives on the matter did not scale through. However, 2 additional borders were reopened, with the previous 4 making a total of 6. Despite the reopening of borders, prices of food items have continued to skyrocket. The Controller General of Customs, Mr. Adewale Adeniyi, over the weekend said that only President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has the prerogative to reopen borders in the country. He stated this in an interactive session with members of the Congoland border community in Meadwa local government area of Katsina State. Adeniyi, who was reacting to agitation for the reopening of the border, assured that engagement and consultations are being made regarding the issue. Although President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has continually pledged commitment to food security in Nigeria. Since border reopening, or let me say prior border reopening, Nigerians were all out with complaints as regards to hike in price of food, attributing it to the fact that the border was closed and the rest of it. Some said the closure was able to give Nigerian rice its own face and name and make it popular, and its market became stronger. But then, still other Nigerians at different quarters were complaining that that was not enough. Nigeria has not grown to that stage of, the reopening, the closure, and the rest. And when this present administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came on board, after so much complaints and, putting heads together, I guess, the federal government reopened the border. And most Nigerians began to, applaud the administration. We felt that this has come, this is a phase that is going to end some of the hardship as regards food shortages in Nigeria. We know that Nigeria before now is one of the agrarian nations, yes, and then before the invention of oil and the rest of it. Now, Nigeria faces another, should I say crisis, another phase of food hitches. Let me not put it crisis, so to say, where the price of food items have skyrocketed. The rice, we were happy, was going down to maybe 28,000 a bag, 25,000, some even as low as 20,000, 22,000, depends on the state you're buying from. I mean, local rice now has gone up to 58 to 60,000 despite the border reopening. And this is so for other food items, talking of the vegetable oil, and other items have all gone, gone up. Looking at all of this, what do you think? Some people are attributing it, like I said, to border reopening. Is this one of the implications?
Now, looking at the policy of border closures as it applies to Nigeria, for example, We want to borrow a leaf from other countries, and I want to talk about China a bit. We discovered that some years ago, looking at what is on ground, China, looking at the population and the capacity of their population to produce, decided to close their borders for export and import, and concentrated in generating goods, manufacturing goods, and doing all sorts inwardly to build capacity, so that at the end of the day they will not be able to grow. Border closures or stoppage of economic transactions with other countries worked for China, because at that time they concentrated inwardly to promote locally produced goods, to expand their capacity using their population as leverage, and to also produce the basic of items, from spoons to toothpick to all sorts of things, to the extent that by the time China was opening its border, it has built capacity to have not only sustained their own economy, but have more than enough to export. And so if we want to borrow a leaf from the revolution that was generated through border closure by China, and look at what happened in Nigeria, we discover that there are two different things entirely that cannot correlate. During the border closure, we discovered that Nigeria did not increase capacity, although we made inroads in some areas as regards ensuring partnership in rice production and some other food items. But you discover that we did not still achieve that self-sustainability, to the extent that if we do not have enough to sustain our populace, then we cannot even talk of exporting. And what made China's economy to grow then was the capacity to be able to export their goods, to be able to earn foreign currency and stabilize the economy. So when Nigeria closed its borders, it did not translate to capacity increment, to the extent that Nigeria could not produce enough to feed itself, talk less of exporting to other countries. Another issue was that the people that went into rice revolution and other area of agricultural practices and manufacturing did not get the needed support from government to be able to enhance their capacity. Because you look at the situation whereby the tools that were being used, the farm implements that were being used, and other things that were being used are still sourced at a very high cost, and the capacity to produce most of these goods were still not as we expect them to be. So in a situation whereby we do not have many local manufacturers of rice, for example, some of them were just producing below capacity, although so many states showed interest, but the cumulative effort of those states still did not amount to what we can call a rice revolution. Although we also saw rice pyramid some years ago, but it fizzled out over time. So when you look at the situation that we have on ground, you discover that when the border was closed, Nigeria did not enjoy the cooperative advantage of it. So when the border was open, it added to our problem, because goods that used to come and compete before started coming in, and when the opportunity of border closure was for us to enhance capacity, increase our production to the extent that goods can be sold at a cheaper rate. But we discovered that because the capacity was not increased, the goods were not still sold at a cheaper rate. So when competition came in after the border opening, it added to the problem, because they were basically selling almost at the same cost, and the aim, to me, was defeated at the end of the day.
Okay, as it stands now, the border is reopened. What do we do to correct some of this? Is there possibility of, correcting this, the intended purpose for the previous border closure, so that we can see the adverse effects on our economy?
The truth of the matter is that there is nothing wrong in doing in inter-African trade or ECOWAS trade treaty as it is. But for any country to benefit from the ECOWAS treaty, you have to be a manufacturing country that is manufacturing enough, and the goods being manufactured are competitive enough to be able to move to other countries at a profit to the manufacturers. So be that as it may, Nigeria has not been able to enjoy the benefit of the AGOA or the ECOWAS Free Trade Pact because we are not producing competitive goods enough that can move to other African countries for us to regain the market. And looking at Nigeria's position in ECOWAS, for example, Nigeria is an hegemony. Nigeria is ECOWAS. So if Nigeria cannot dominate in the area of commerce and trade, in the ECOWAS, for example, then how can we talk of dominating in Africa or even being a voice outside Africa? So what we need to do is to increase capacity locally. We need to be competitive locally. We have seen a few flashes of brilliance from some companies like Dangote Cement that have been able to move around Africa and some outside Africa. We have also seen some other companies like BUA and some other ones that are trying as much as possible to increase the landscape, not staying alone in Nigeria. We also see the financial sector, how our Nigerian banks are moving all over Africa to have footprints there. Good, but the most important thing that Nigeria needs now is to build manufacturing capacity and improve on our goods and services. We also have a comparative advantage in our agriculture to the extent that in some of these agricultural produce like sorghum, Benny seed and the rest, Nigeria is one of the countries that produce the highest producer of these products, and we are not taking advantage of them. Nigeria needs to look inwards to build the capacity to the extent that it is only our agricultural products that will be flooding not only the West African market but the whole of African market and also beyond. So until we get to that stage, we cannot say that we are benefiting from the border opening presently, because it is when we have more than enough and we can sell at a competitive rate that imports will also need either to stop or for them to toe the line of local production. But until we get to that, we have not been able to achieve anything.
So in upping our local production, what do we do?
Yes, in helping local production, the government needs to create the enabling environment. This new administration of President Bola Tinubu rolled out some policies in the area of Agric revolution, provision of land for both farming and cattle rearing and the rest, provision of grants for youths to be able to come into a provision of other agricultural value chain and logistics, which is very, very good. But this has to be aggressively implemented to the extent that looking at the population of Nigeria of like 220 million people, there is nothing wrong if 40% of our population are actively involved in agriculture. And if we have 40% of the 220 million strong people involved in agriculture, we are talking about over 100 million people. When 100 million people is decisive and is serious about something, you can imagine the output. You can imagine what comes out of it. So the Nigeria can become the agricultural hub of Africa if 40% of our population is committed to agriculture and the government is supporting all along. We have seen this play out in even other African countries that decide to take a portion of their economy and encourage the people to go into it. We've seen it cattle rearing in Kenya and some other in South Africa and some other areas where they have become a major force in those products and in those type of farming practices. Nigeria has the capacity, we have the population, we also have the wherewithal to become an agricultural hub in Africa. But until the government directs the focus of the people to agriculture and we stop chasing shadows, then we might not be able to achieve that aim.
Okay, yes, we'll take a quick break. Quickly, when we return, we'll continue. Sit and go nowhere. still Agric Economy on ARCN Television, Abuja, Nigeria, and we've been talking to our guest, Mr. Gabriel Dakolo, on the implications of border reopening. He has talked to us about sincerity of purpose when it comes to the part of government in ensuring that policies are put in place to make Nigerians focus more on agriculture. This way, Nigeria will be able to stand anywhere in the world to take its pride of place as regards the agrarian nation that it was before now. Looking at the factors you talked about, we know that security is one major issues we have, and this is part of looking at it now. For some time, we see that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been going to different countries to woo them to come and invest in Nigeria, and yes, and some Nigerians are complaining that if you're wooing investors to come, where do they come to? A nation without security and the rest of it. As regards this, we know that the security agencies are doing their best. It's better now than what it was before now. We saw what happened in Abuja, the train from December up until January before things became a bit safer and took shape. What do you think can be done in ensuring that even when we put out these factors, you mentioned that putting out factors, I know that would be security, the good road channel, and the rest of it.
Yeah.
How do we ensure that we're able to get this, and when we get this, is sustained?
Um, for any successful farming practice all around the world, security is very, very key. And in Nigeria, was some of the factors that adversely affected the farming in Nigeria or agricultural practices was insecurity. And over the past 2 to 3 years, we discovered that farmers have been kidnapped, some killed in their farms, and so many has happened that has led to discouragement in farming practices in Nigeria. And even for those that even decided to privately own farms to produce agricultural products, some of them had to be kidnapped and they pay so much on ransom to the extent that some of them, when they eventually released, they go bankrupt, or some eventually die in the process. So the government needs to critically look at the area of insecurity as it regards agricultural practices in Nigeria. Because if there is no security, even if the government uses all the means to encourage people, they will still not go into farming because people will still want to be alive than go and risk their lives. So it's a thing of it's a good area when you look at the government trying to have what we call forest guards. That is a good initiative that, when implemented, can reduce the spate of insecurity in our forests and in our farm areas. Another issue that the government needs to do is to heavily invest in security, not only in the urban areas but also in these rural areas, because most farming practices take place in rural areas, and the investment in security in those areas is not as commensurate to the risk that is involved over there. I don't see any reason why the government cannot have enough drone technology to be able to monitor farms, forests all over the country. I still know that despite the fact that there is increase in exchange rate, drone is still one of the most effective way of combating insecurity all over the world. And Nigeria has the resources to be able to have enough drone technology to monitor movement of people both in the forest and in the farms, so as to be able to detect undesirable elements. We might not have the manpower to be in every of the forests and in the farms, but we can use technology to leverage on how to combat these acts. Because when there is drone technology and there is a workstation that can monitor, all we need to do is that when we see suspicious movement or anything, then the manpower, no matter how small or more, can now be deployed to those areas to be able to make sure that it is safe. We have seen the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation using this drone technology to secure pipelines, and it has been successful. So I don't see any reason why, in addition to creation of forest guards, drone technology should not be used extensively to secure our farms and to secure our forests, because when that is done, it will encourage more people. If incidences of kidnap, rape and killings in farm reduces, then the people that have left farming, both in subsistence subsistence farming and commercial farming, can now be encouraged to come back, and even more people will want to join them. I am interested in having a commercial farm, but I'm afraid that if I go to a village, for example, and I have acres there, and I start using my money, for example, to cultivate, whether even if it's vegetable or cassava or thereabout, there will be information around that one man that has money has come to open a farm there, and they will soon come and trail such a fellow. And when such a fellow is kidnapped, for example, they don't ask for anything less than 20-50 million. And that would, the fellow might not have the resources to be able to pay up. So he might end up losing his life or end up being traumatized for the rest of his life. So that is why insecurity needs to be nipped in the bud if we actually want success in our agricultural practices in Nigeria.
Yes, you've said it all very well. Okay, looking at other aspects as regards road network and the rest of it, we know that like you said, most farm areas are in the rural areas, and if you look at the road, for example, bringing goods from Ibadan down to Abuja, for example, coming in this not the usual small car that can move faster. Looking at the road channel, you know that goods is going to take for about a week or more on the road. If you're carrying cashew, for example,
it will perish on the way.
It's gone.
Actually, one of the major challenges, apart from insecurity, is road network that we can call logistics when it comes to agriculture. I've heard a lot from rural farmers as regards challenges of getting their products from the farms to the marketplace. There was a particular interview, should I say, that I had with a farmer in Delta State, and they after they have cultivated their cassava, prepare it to become flakes, cassava flakes, which we call gari, for example. And he says that, okay, if they have the intention of selling that gari, for example, for 15,000 for one bag, but when you want to take it to the market, because of the bad road, the transporters might want to charge for one bag 2,500 naira. So that increases the markup of the cost of that bag of gari. And looking at the time it will take them to get there, they will add all those inconveniences to it. And at the end of the day, it has a major effect on the cost of selling that product in the market. The issue that you just mentioned of perishability is also another aspect. That if you say, okay, a very good vehicle that is in good condition, whether it's a trailer or a lorry, that wants to take your good as fast as possible to the marketplace, will charge far more higher than a rickety one that is going to take a longer period. The third aspect of it is the cost of petrol and diesel for those vehicles. It also makes the consideration of how much they are going to charge an average farmer to get his goods to the market. So when a journey under a very good road that is supposed to take 30 minutes, for example, will take 3 hours when the roads are bad, and it is per hour, and the inconveniences that makes the transporters to take charges, and at the end of the day, when the goods now get to the marketplace, we witness continuous increase. That is not as a result of production issues, but it's as a result of transportation and logistic problems. So that is why having good road networks in our rural areas and farming communities that links up to the marketplaces is very, very important, because one, it reduces perishability of those products, it also reduces the cost of transportation, and it also reduces the incidence of accident and also kidnapping along the way. Very important for us to look at that.
Okay, yes, thank you for coming on the program, sir. You've heard it, we're talking about the implications of border reopening. Our guest, Mr. Gabriel Dakolo, has taken us down what China did back then, similar to what Nigeria did just in the past administration. He mentioned some of the grey areas and possible way of ensuring that we get it right. He talked about having more indigenous producers, manufacturers. That way, we'll be able to ensure that agricultural production, make it up to its normal, as the highest in the country's GDP. And then we also looked at other factors around things that could make it easier, looking at the road network, ensuring the security and the rest of it. On that, we'll be wrapping up the program this week. Join us again, same time, same station next week. I am Khadija Oluwatoyin. I'm saying thank you for joining us.